Okay, so now we're looking at a table, and we're looking at two general forms of conics, and we're trying to see, first of all, which conic is it? Is it parabola? Is it a parabola, a hyperbola, ellipse, or a circle? And then we're going to use the process of completing the square to write it in standard form, based off of whatever shape it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to this first one. I'm immediately going to try to find all the x squareds and y squared terms. So over here, this says that I have both, so it could either be an ellipse or it could be a hyperbola, okay? Because of the fact that this sign that is in between these is a positive, and this too is a positive, we know it's going to be an ellipse, because an ellipse will add and hyperbolas subtract. Okay? Over here, we don't have another y squared term. We just have an x squared term and a y that's all by itself. So it's almost like y equals x squared. This should tell us that this is going to be a form of a parabola. Okay, so we're going to say a parabola here, and because we're going to say there's an x squared term, but no y squared term. Okay, and over here we have both, so we have both x squared and y squared terms, and they're both the same sign. They're both positive. So they're both positive. So therefore it's going to be adding like we were saying, and it's going to be, in fact, an ellipse. Okay, so use the process of completing the square and getting it in standard form. Okay, so let's get all of our x's together. Leave a space to complete the square. Okay, let's move the constant over to the right side, which is going to become a negative 23. Let me clean this up just a little bit. So we'll say negative 23 is on the right side. And then this minus y is just going to stay here for now. Okay? So our b term, I'm ready to go ahead and do it now because my coefficient of x squared is 1. So I'll take that b term of 8 divided by 2 and square it, because we know completing the square is b over 2 squared. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Squared is 16. Okay, because of the fact I never had to GCF anything out, and there's an understood 1 here, when I multiply that 1 with what I got with completing the square, it says that I'm really going to need to add 16 to the right side. I need to balance this equation. Okay, and that's the only thing that I need to do, because nothing was completed with the y. So square root this term, we get x. Square root that 16, we get 4. And borrow this first sign will give us what this would be unfoiled. Okay, so it's like going backwards, factoring it to an unfoiled piece. And yes, if we were to look at this and write out x plus 4 twice and foil this out, we should get x squared plus 8x plus 16. Okay, so what we did, we just did it all backwards to get this. So negative 23 plus that 16 is going to give me a negative 7 right here. And now standard form, you can write it two different ways. We will accept two different ways. We can either write it like you have on your formula chart with y minus 7 and get your x squared all by itself. Okay, I think we did this with WebAssign as well, as far as not having a coefficient here. This is an acceptable standard form piece. But I like to teach my students to get y all by itself. So I would add that 7 over to the left side, if you will. I'm just going to write it as y equals x plus 4 squared plus 7. Because from here, I can see that the vertex is going to be a negative 4, positive 7. Because what's in parentheses is the opposite, and what's outside parentheses is exactly what you see. Okay? So again, I know this is just a little bit of extension. The vertex would be a negative 4, 7. In this form, it's easier to identify. Because if you try to do it from this form, you're going to have to interpret this as an opposite, even though it's not in parentheses. That's why I don't like that form per se, and I like to get y all by itself. Okay, so let's complete the square over here for two variables, both x and y. And we're we're also first going to group them together. So minus 40x. Leave a space to complete the square. And then we're going to group the y's together. So plus y squared plus 12y. Leave a space to complete that square. And we're going to move this 17 over to the right. So we have to subtract that to move it over to the right. Now, I can't complete the square yet because I have a coefficient on x squared. I can on y, but not on the x squared. So let's factor out. So I'm changing this. And a symbol for change in math is a triangle. It's just helping me identify and keep this a little bit organized. I am going to GCF out a 4 from each of these things so that x squared minus 10x is left. Okay? And now, because I have the coefficient to 1, I can now take this b, divide it by 2, and square it to complete the square. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. Squared it is plus 25. But because I did this GCF, I need to remember, very, very important, I'm not just adding 25 to the left side, I'm adding 4 times 25, which is basically saying I have to now add 100 to the right to balance this out. Okay? And that's the piece for x. Now I'm able to complete the square because I never had to GCF out anything from y squared because the coefficient was already 1. So 12 is b, so 12 over 2 is 6. Squared is 36. Okay? So there's an understood 1 here. So if I did the same thing like I did over here, it's still 1 times 36. So I'm going to add 36. Okay? So let's bring this all together. First of all, 136 minus 72. So 136 minus 72 is going to give us, let me make sure that I did this correct. 136 minus 72 gives us 64. So we're going to put 64 there. So it'll be 64s on the right side. And now here we go. We have the 4. And this will become x, borrow the first sign, minus, take the square root of the last, 5. And then the square root of y squared is y, borrow the first sign is plus, and then take the square root of the last term. We get 6. And this is going to be it. We have a 4 for that coefficient because we GCF'd it out. But we don't have anything for this because it was just an understood 1. And because it's an ellipse, remember ellipses are equaling 0 and so are hyperbolas. We need to find a way to make 64 equal, or sorry, not equal 0, equal 1. We need to find a way to make 64 equal 1. And the way we're going to do that is just to divide this, and this piece by 64. Okay, so notice this 4 over 64 will in fact reduce, okay, and it's going to reduce to 16 on the denominator. So you have x minus 5 squared over 16 plus y plus 6 squared over 64 is equal to 1. You can see that a is 4, b is 8, and the center, if you needed it, would be 5, negative 6. All we needed to know was the standard form for that.